those of you who are watching this video on Facebook, you already recognize and know that we've got Beth Heaton here on the show, longtime host, first-time guest. Beth, welcome to the show. How does it feel to be sitting on the other side of the table?
I love it. I show up and you do all the work and I get to do all the talking. So honestly, for me, couldn't be better.
Finally, been hosting the show for years, and we get to do this. And I think because you're the host, I actually want to put in a plug. If you like hearing Beth as the guest of the show today, and of course you love hearing Beth as the host of the show, give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. We love to get those 5-star ratings. They help get our expert advice in front of more people. So please stop by and give us a rating or a review at some point after you listen to the show today. All right, now Beth, we are bringing you on the show to tap a different set of experience that you have than I think is typical. Usually it's all about your admissions expertise. Today, we're turning to your parenting expertise.
Oh, not sure I would say expertise. I am a parent.
Parenting experience. You
yes.
qualify as a parent.
I qualify as a parent, but and yeah, expertise is tricky.
A parent of a rising senior.
Yes.
Your son, Jack, is currently in the process of looking at colleges. He'll be applying to colleges this fall. And I want to talk about that in detail. But what I want to do first is rewind way back to when you started with College Coach, which was quite a while ago. And Jack was quite young at that time.
Yes.
And so I'm curious, at that point, when you started thinking about college counseling, how did you think about Jack's trajectory at that point when he was really young? And I'm taking notes here because I've got an 8 and a 7-year-old. I want to hear a little bit about what your perspective was then.
Well, when I started working at College Coach, Jack was 2.5. I had him while I was an admissions officer at Penn. And at that time, both when I joined College Coach and also when I had him, I was working at an Ivy League. I had gone to an Ivy League. I traveled with Ivy League schools and other highly selective schools. So my world, as far as colleges were concerned, was somewhat narrow.
Yeah.
And I did know, because I was doing admissions, that there were a lot of hurdles that he was going to have to leap if he was going to be competitive at that level. So I do believe that there was a part of me that thought, I wonder what this is going to look like for him. I have no idea what admissions is even going to be like by the time he's applying to college. But certainly my aspirations were that of every parent. I think at that point, he was walking and talking and doing all those things on time. So yeah. Maybe he was brilliant and perhaps he was going to be one of these world changers. And while I would say I still think my son is brilliant and could be a world changer, I think I don't think I know that my thoughts around where he will go to college and how important that is have changed somewhat. I think I always knew that going to college was going to be key, in my opinion, for him. Where he went, I was a little bit more like, well, we'll see. But in the back of my mind, of course, I'm like, well, maybe he would like to go to my alma mater, or, maybe he would like to do this.
Yeah.
And that has shifted perceptibly over the years.
Same experience. I remember, my wife and I talking about our kids and which one was going to be the Reedy of the two when they were like 2 and 3. And it's like, this is a kind of a silly thing to be saying. But of course, like our view was fairly narrow at that point. I wonder if over time, Jack now being 16, 17 years old, is he 17?
17, yeah.
Okay. Has the way that you've changed kind of your perception of him and where what his options might be, is that a result of getting to know him better? Obviously he's grown up, or a result of exposure to parents in these circumstances and how they've engaged with the process? I mean, probably a combination of the two, but how would you weigh that?
I think it's a combination of the two. And then there's a third thing that I would add in there, and possibly the most impactful, which is that my insight and knowledge of the world of college and what is available really, really expanded through my time here. And visiting different schools and starting to be like, oh my gosh, what a cool program that is. And I love this campus. I would love for Jack to go here because on some level, you do always have your child in the back of your mind. And as I saw more and more and realized that there were so many different places that could be great launching pads for him, for his future,
Mhm.
I think that really shifted my mindset as far as how important a particular college would be for him, or a particular group of colleges. I
Yeah.
think, also I got to know him, as you say, and as I think every parent out there has this experience, or most do. I will say my stepson is very much like his dad. They share a lot of similarities. They even speak the same. It's kind of weird. And I would say that's not the case with Jack and me. He has a nice mix of his dad and me, and then his own person. And so I also started to recognize, or not started to, but definitely embrace the idea that I had my college experience and this is going to be his. He and I are different people. What he's going to want out of this is different than what I wanted. And by the way, I already had it, right? So I don't need to want him to have my experience because I already had my experience. And then the third thing that you mentioned, just other parents, I saw in my work great examples of how to embrace your child as they are. And then I also saw some examples of maybe how not to do it. And I for sure started to resolve to really not start every conversation by apologizing for the places in which I felt like my child fell short, and instead to really embrace the idea that, wow, he's so great at these things, and the other things, not his thing. So, and that's okay, right? So I think
Yeah.
those three things really kind of brought me to where I am today.
No, I think that's great. And I wonder about when you started to see that development for you. I mean, did it start happening early high school? Is that something that when you really started thinking more explicitly about the process of applying to college, that it became more salient for you? Like where's the point at which that started to happen?
It actually happened much younger, I
Hmm.
would say, because I did start to embrace the idea that, oh, there are so many schools that are out there. So I really did kind of let go of the idea that I wanted him to follow in my path and go to a very selective school. And I should also add that his father followed a really different path than mine. And so I also had, at that point, more exposure to what another path could look like. And then with my husband, I saw the path that he followed, which was, again, very different from mine, from my ex-husband's. And so I was very close to a bunch of different ways. But what I started to see were the things that Jack really enjoyed and the things that he didn't. And one thing that I saw is that maybe he wasn't as passionate about doing well in school as I was, which is not to say that he didn't do well, but that it didn't really drive him. And I came home from fifth grade with the first B I'd ever gotten in penmanship, by the way.
The
And
last
I
page,
was
right?
devastated by this B. This was terrible, right?
Yeah.
So I started to recognize this is a different kid altogether, while simultaneously seeing what was required to get in at this very elite level and starting to recognize that he could come into his own. He could be someone who starts to really embrace a particular area of focus, but it won't surprise me if he doesn't, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I think there's a very narrow, I mean, really like the expectations that colleges place on students when they do admission is looking at a very narrow subset of what it means to be a young person. And I think
Yes.
where students say this isn't for me, it can sometimes mean that they are not competitive for the top schools, but that doesn't mean that they're not great kids who have really strong talents. And one of the things that I've observed as an educator here, when I first started, I knew we had a lot of colleagues who had kids that were going through the process. And I thought that meant, oh, these kids are going to go to the best school, the hardest to get into because they know their
Yes.
stuff. But
Key, hardest to get
actually,
into,
hardest to
right?
get
Yeah.
into. Yeah, we had to
Yes.
change my phrasing there. But actually, I think that what you're describing about this expansion in terms of an understanding of what the possibilities are and an understanding that it's not where you go, but who you are that makes a difference has
Yes.
really been something I've observed in all of our colleagues in the way that they support students as they get into this college process. So
Yes.
that's been really cool. And I think really counterintuitive in terms of how you think about an expert in this space and what they might do with their own kids.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit more about you and supporting Jack directly, because he knows that you do this stuff.
Yes.
He knows mom has her podcast and is like an expert and worked at Penn and all of this stuff. And I think he talks about that with a little bit of a grin on his face as well, acknowledging that. How do you find balance as a parent who knows her stuff in terms of what Jack, quote, should be doing and what Jack wants to do? How do you have those conversations with him?
Sure. Well, I will say that throughout middle school, he was trying different things and not really finding anything that he really enjoyed. And there were absolutely moments of frustration. So lest I portray this as like, it's been really great and I've embraced the kid I have and like smooth sailing. No, it has not worked like that, right? I have been eager for him to find some things that he enjoys doing.
Yeah.
And he didn't get very far on that front in middle school. And more than once I said to him, I don't really care what you do, but just be aware you will be doing something every sports season. So maybe you're playing a spring sport, maybe you're not. But if you're not, you're going to do something different, right? So I wanted him to do debate. I thought he would be a brilliant debater because he debates me on everything and often wins. He had no interest in trying it. There were a few different things that I suggested that I do really think he would have enjoyed that he just wasn't interested in. And for, so that has been an evolution. And so what I've tried really hard to do is be less focused on what and more focused on, it's important that you're doing things, whatever those are. That's fine, but I want you to find some things that you can commit to and do all 4 years. And that he has absolutely done. And so I have, because of that evolution, I'm fine with what he's chosen to do. And he's done lots of nice things, great things. I would say typical things that an average teenager would do. And that's been great for him. And it's perfect for him.
But he also, he does things that are typical, right? Like on the football team, but he does them in a way where he really throws himself into them. Like he really is invested and commits to them. And I think that's probably, as a parent, it's like, well, this isn't sticking. When he finally found that thing, he was 100% committed to it. And I think it's hard as a parent to have that patience and wait for that thing to come along. But when it does, I think it can be really exciting.
You're right. And what happens if it doesn't happen? And I will the counterpoint to this is my stepson, who did not ever find something in high school that he really loved so much, but he did things and that was fine too. Right. And that worked for him. So I do think that's the key. We certainly can talk a lot about finding the things that you're really interested in and curious about that you want to investigate further. And but it doesn't happen for all students, and there's plenty of room for those students. They make up the majority of students, I would say, too.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I want to talk about essays in a moment, but when you talk to him about this concept of, I don't care what you do, but there's something you need to do. What are you falling back on as the justification for saying that? Is it, I worked in these admission offices and I know how important this stuff is, or was there something else that you brought to the table as mom in this context?
I would like to say that I would say to him, it's really important for you to develop your interests and stuff. But really what I would say to him is there are 10 spots on the common application and you need to fill them out. See what I told you, not a parenting expert, just a parent. So yeah, that was the focus from which I presented it. The thing about Jack is that he is a curious kid and he's an engaged kid. So I wasn't worried about like, you need to develop as a person or things like that, which are also really nice offshoots of all this involvement. And probably at the end of the day, the most important part, but I felt like he needed to hear, this is why you're doing it. This is why you have to do it.
But he is a good, he's engaged, he connects well with other people. And I think there is this important piece where you say, look, an admission office isn't going to know this unless you have something that you can demonstrate as you work through the application. And so now, you were sort of speaking in terms of this is coming down the road. You've got to know that this is part of the Common App, or I know it. And that's why I'm telling you to do it. Now he's in a position where he's actually going to start filling out that Common App, where he is actually putting his college list together. I want to talk about essay, and then we'll see if we got some time also to talk about the college list. You obviously great writer. You're a good editor. You have been close to the essay writing process for years and years. How are you staying out of it?
Well, for starters, I had him talk to you.
Right.
But even then, I didn't totally stay out of it, did I? Because I did leave the instructions to Jack and to you were whatever he writes about, it can't be about football, because writing about sports is such a common thing. And I knew that he had more that he could tap into. All students have more that they could tap into. So that's how I am. I really thought that if Jack and I talked about what he could write about, I would steamroll him and choose his topic for him. And I thought it would be much better to let it unfold a little bit more appropriately, since I have this great team, to ask you, hey, do you mind giving an hour to Jack to talk to him through these ideas? So that's one way in which I'm staying out of it. I will edit, but the way that I always edit, which is preserving the student's voice and more just say, hey, I would love to learn more about this. How about a little bit more about this? Do you need this? To help him just kind of tighten it up and make sure he's including the right things and including the self-reflection. I never write essays for kids, and I certainly won't be starting with my own child.
No, and I think that, we always talk about the importance of the student's authentic voice coming through. And this is a really cool thing as a parent, because you know him so well. You know what his voice sounds like. How he talks about these things. And so it's just a matter of saying, use your voice to talk about this aspect of this thing. Give me more here. I need less of this, but really making sure that his voice comes through in the process. I do think it is smart, and it's great advice, I think, for parents out there who maybe didn't work at Penn, to farm out certain aspects of the writing process to other trusted adults or other people that can help to support your student, because it's going to be hard for a kid to do the brainstorm, the topic development, topic identification, write the essay, do the editing, all with one parent. I think that they're going to get sick of you, and you're going to get sick of them. So no offense, Beth, but great choice to,
totally,
step back there.
None taken. And I think it's an accurate assessment that I thought this part of the process would be much better with somebody else, even though this is such an area of expertise for me. It would be best for him.
And when I was talking to him, I said, you can't write about football. You really should write about football. So I was trying my best to be subversive there, but I think we went the other direction. So that's great. I want to talk a little bit just about the college list process and just how you're thinking about, we've got a couple of minutes here, but how are you thinking about this idea of introducing Jack to schools that he might consider? And it's great because in our team chats or in our emails, he'll say, oh, I got to make a note of this school for Jack. Oh, I love that scholarship. I'm going to make a note of this one. But ultimately, he's going, right? So how are you finding that balance between what you know and anticipate about a school and its culture and its fit for him versus how he reacts to that school when he sees it or researches it?
I think the first huge piece, there are two. The first is that I really, truly, I don't have a vested interest and I don't have a choice in the back of my head that I think I want him to be at. I have some schools that I think would be great for him, but I'm not laser focused on them.
Does he know what schools those are?
He does. I have shared with him that I think these could be good fits, but ultimately it is your choice. And by the way, the schools that I have in my head were generated by him. They were ideas that he had. And once he started expressing, oh, I'm interested in this school, then I was saying, okay, well, here are some other schools that are like that school, right? So it starts with him first. And then as we have kind of looked at the list, the other huge piece that I am top of mind for me is price. And so, when we are considering schools, we are looking also at, oh, well, this one could be good. You might get some merit money here, or this one is affordable, whether you get merit money or you don't. I don't believe he's going to qualify for financial aid. He might qualify for a little, but I don't think he's going to. And so we've always had to keep the finance piece top of mind when we think about that. And that is a big mistake that I see a lot of families making, is just they're not talking about the finance part up front. And then students are applying to a range of schools, many of them extraordinarily expensive. And then they find it difficult to say, well, you got in, but now we can't afford it. So then they go into debt. So we're not playing that game here. We are keeping that finance piece part of the process. And then the big things that I tried to do is get Jack to really think about, what do you want in your school? What are the key components? And if he sees something at one school that he thinks is really cool, we look for equivalents at the other colleges, or I ask him to go and
Nice.
look, do they have something like this program at some of the other schools that you're thinking about? And then finally, we have a really balanced list. So he is looking at schools that are going to be a little bit more difficult to get into for him. And then we have a nice group where I think he will get in. And then we have a nice group where I'm pretty sure he's going to get in and where he will hopefully qualify for money.
Cool. That's great. Sounds like you know what you're talking about. Have you done this before?
If I don't at this point, we're all in deep trouble.
Some serious trouble. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I could say, Mom, I thought you knew your stuff. What's going on here?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, this has been awesome. I hope that we can bring you back on some shows a little bit later in the fall, maybe right before he submits, talk maybe in the spring about outcomes, or just figure out a way to touch base and see how this whole thing is unfolding for you. Because it's pretty fun to see how it's going.
Absolutely. As you know, I'm always happy to come on and talk. And we might even be able to get Jack to come on when it's all over and he's made his choice. I think that might make for an interesting
That would be
interview.
super cool. Yeah,
He'll
that
tell
would be
all
great.
the secrets of what actually happened versus my presentation, right?
That's exactly right. Awesome. Well, thanks, Beth, for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ian.
And yeah, folks, when we come back, we're going to talk about college finance payment plans. So don't go away.